A man and a woman at the table, no matter their looks, temperament, and clothes at home, they all looked very luxurious and decent. The man looked a little haggard, and his face and lips had lost his normal blood color. At first sight, he was a chronically ill, or even dying person. But the woman next to him was very well maintained and very beautiful. Her appearance was 7 points similar to Sarah's, and she seemed to be in her 30s. Charlie recognized the two at a glance. They were Uncle Philip, whom he had known since childhood, and his wife, Aunt Lennon. Just when Charlie recognized the two of them, the two also recognized him. Philip's whole expression was extremely shocked. His face was already very thin. At this time, his eyes widened, trembling and trying to say something, but he seemed to be in his throat. Miss Lennon, who was on the side, was also dumbfounded. She stood up, pointing at Charlie with one finger and covering her mouth with one hand. You are. You are Wade, are you Charlie? Charlie's nose was sour, and he sighed softly, and said with a trembling voice, Aunt Lennon, I am Charlie. After speaking, he looked at Philip, who was trembling and unable to speak, and said in a trembling voice, Uncle. Hello? And Aunt Lennon, how are you? Philip looked at him and muttered, Are you really Charlie? Charlie nodded seriously and said, Uncle, it's me, I'm Charlie, do you still recognize me? Recognize. Philip wiped away tears and said, You are the same as your father when he was young, and you are similar to the photos of your grandfather when he was young. With that, he stood up laboriously, and then walked towards Charlie. Charlie hurried forward, came to Philip a few steps to support him, and said with gratitude and guilt, Uncle, for so many years, you and Aunt Lennon have been worried. Philip wiped out a cloud of old tears and choked up. Charlie, where have you been for so many years? In these years, I have almost traveled all over the world to find you, and there has been no whereabouts of you. Charlie couldn't help but sighed. Uncle, in fact, I have been in Orus Hill these years, and I have been growing up in the orphanage until I was 18. How come? Philip blurted out, I went to Orus Hill to find you several times. I always went to the welfare home, orphanage, and rescue station, but I never found your whereabouts. Charlie said, Uncle, Mr. Stephen, the housekeeper of the Wade family back then, sent someone to take over the orphanage secretly. He was afraid that someone would harm me, so he hid all my information. Don't know. I only realized that something was wrong after I met Sarah a few days ago, so I went to Stephen and asked about it. Then he told me the hidden information. Philip was stunned for a while, and then he nodded and said, That's how it is. That's how it is. It seems that Stephen is indeed a person who knows his gratitude, and your father treated him like a mountain back then, not a wrong person. As he said, he couldn't help but choked up. These years, I have not been able to find any of your whereabouts. I once thought that you are no longer alive. At this point, Philip pursed his lips, but tears have already burst. He endured it for a long time, until tears completely blurred his vision, and finally burst into tears. Big brother Wade, you are alive in the sky. Look at your son is back. He is back, and I finally have a face to see you. Philip was agitated and cried a few times before coughing violently. Lennon on the side was busy wiping the tears from her eyes. While carefully stroking her husband on the back, she choked and said, Philip, Charlie is back here. It is a happy event, don't cry, your health is not good now, and you can't stand the emotional ups and downs. After Philip calmed down a little bit, he nodded with tears, took Charlie's hand, and said seriously, Charlie, sit down and tell Uncle how you came here these years. After he finished speaking, he realized something, and hurriedly looked at his daughter Sarah, and blurted out, Sarah, how did you and your Charlie meet? Sarah read eyes and choked up and said, Dad, I'm sorry. I have kept this from you and Mom. In fact, when I went to Orus Hill to pick up an advertising endorsement, I already saw Charlie. To tell you, I just want to give you both a surprise after Charlie comes home. Philip nodded repeatedly, and said with emotion, Surprise. This is indeed a surprise. It is a great surprise. As he said, he grabbed Charlie's hand with both hands and said seriously, Charlie, no matter what you have experienced over the years, it's good to be able to come back. Don't go back to Orus Hill again this time. The marriage contract between you and Sarah was made by Lennon me with your father and mother. No matter what you have experienced in the past, Sarah is your fiancée. Now that you come back, my body is deteriorating. You too will take advantage of my old bones. The wedding is held before it gets to the ground. When Charlie heard this, his expression suddenly became very embarrassed and guilty. Seeing this, Lennon hurriedly blurted out, "Charlie, you must not have any psychological pressure. After you and daughter are married, this home is your home. Whether you return to Wade's house or not, you won't be forbidden. Forget it, you are our son-in-law." Lennon's words are relatively subtle, but Charlie understands the meaning very well. She is saying that no matter whether you have money or not, you don't need to care about it. It is your own home. Hearing this, Charlie couldn't help comparing Lennon with his mother-in-law Elaine. This comparison was simply the difference between Ladybug and Wasp. Sarah said embarrassingly on the side, "Dad, Mom, Charlie is already married." Huh? When the couple heard this, they were both dumbfounded.